What's up, family? This is the Locker Room Beef Podcast. I am joined by one of my favorite guests, the Philly guy. Nick, how are you?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. It's been a long ass time since we put out a pod, and that is completely my fault. But I hope to put out a crap ton of content today. This has been, I believe that the month of March, it might be my favorite sports month. You just get so many things. Starts, right? Yeah, exactly. Because baseball starts the very end of March, and all I want to see is Stan and Judge hit homers, which actually isn't a lie. But no, it's not because of baseball. I have grown such a deep appreciation and love for college basketball. I can totally see myself next year going all in, and it's not even because so much that I love college basketball. It's because I love trying to predict which collegiate basketball players are going to translate in the NBA. And the more that I do my homework and research, the more I get passionate about who I think is going to do well. And so I've always done that lightly the past 5 or 6 years. Every year I try to predict in my head who's going to be rookie of the year. And I'm about 50% on that. But and by 50%, I mean I get it right on the dot, or that person is out of the league in 2 years. Like a Jaleel Okafor, he's not out of the league, but he's
don't say that name.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's why I've grown such a love and appreciation for basketball, and so for college basketball. And I actually think March Madness, I've just become a lot more into it. I mean, every year it's hard not to get into it. I find it to be a lot I've made a funny parallel with college basketball and March Madness. Everybody gets super giddy and becomes an expert, quote unquote, about college basketball in March, just the same way that American soccer fans do when we are in the World Cup and everybody decides yeah, I've been a long time fan. And it's the same kind of random
Kevin, are you
drive.
subtweeting me right now?
No, not subtweeting you. I consider you a real soccer fan, but you and I both know there are a lot of people out there that have maybe watched 3 or 4 matches in their entire life, and then the World Cup rolls around and America's in it, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna smash Germany, Portugal is shit, Spain, I'm pretty sure we can handle. They'll start saying some foul-ish, and you can clearly tell they don't know their crap. Anyway, so that's what I find about college basketball. People all of a sudden become experts. And I don't think I'm the first to tell you, if people ask me advice for filling out their bracket, and I always go, just put whatever you think, because when it comes to March Madness, literally anything could happen. Loyola Chicago could make it to the Final Four.
Oh, I had them in my Sweet 16.
Respect. My little sister, I've gotten her to fill out a bracket the past 2 or 3 years, and she knows nothing about college basketball.
She's beating you every year.
She couldn't name you a player, but yeah, I think she has beaten me every year. Actually, no, last year she did pretty poorly. This year she did pretty well. She actually had originally Loyola Chicago in her Elite 8, and I said, are you sure? And so I made her question it, and she had them losing in the round of 32, which now she's pissed at me, and rightfully so. I told her it's her fault. If she's easily influenced, that's her fault. But yeah, so just talk to me a little bit about how college basketball has been for you, what your thoughts on March Madness are. It's been obviously a pretty crazy tournament. What's the biggest surprise, and what are you looking forward to for the championship game in a couple days?
Oh, so you know my influence with March Madness. Back in high school, I was the bracket guy. I ran every March Madness bracket. The whole school would get involved. We have 100 entries, lots of money. Definitely shouldn't have been trusting a 16-year-old kid with that much money. That's a different story for a different day. But I love March Madness, and I like to think I always know who the Cinderellas are. I was the kid who called Gulf Coast over Georgetown, and everyone called me a meth head, crackhead, whatever you want. But I love to pick the upsets, and actually, I was 100% the second I saw Miami against Loyola Chicago, I started laughing, because then they got Tennessee in the next round, and I was just laughing and laughing, because there's no way. They're going to roll through this until they hit Cincinnati. But Cincinnati went down to Nevada, so opened up the whole bracket. Did not call UMBC, though. That one
Not too many people did.
Yeah. Honestly, my Final Four was pretty good this year. I got Kansas and Villanova right. I'm pissed because I took Houston over Michigan in almost all of my brackets, and that game Houston should have won. But when Houston had lost that game, I would have taken Michigan all the way. if I had known that Houston would have lost that game. So like I felt I was pretty good in that bracket. I got Gonzaga going down to Florida State in a couple of my brackets, not the one I think I'm with you, but and then I had UNC when it going to the Final Four in a couple, so that was a disappointment. And then of course I had Virginia in my Final Four in every other bracket. So like.
Yeah, but so did everybody else. I mean, I had Arizona as a champion in one of my brackets. So
I had Arizona losing early in most of my brackets, either to Buffalo or Kentucky.
I just thought they were the most talented team in the field, and I was like, well, if they click on all cylinders, like it could happen. And my thing was, so some of the things I called correctly. I was very against Cincinnati. I thought they were a very weak high seed. I saw them.
I thought that whole bracket was weak. That whole corner.
Yeah. It was so difficult. For me, the toughest side to predict was the bottom left, which was like UNC, Gonzaga, Xavier, Florida State, Michigan.
Even A&M, yeah, that was
just so difficult to call that one because even though I typically think I like UNC, like I picked them to go far and a lot of times in brackets, I just thought this year that they exceeded expectations. I actually thought they were a pretty weak team talent-wise, and they just happened to play well enough in the ACC and their overall schedule that they got a 2 seed. But I didn't think they had 2 seed talent, so I saw them losing early, which they did. I didn't know a whole lot about Michigan, but it was kind of like process of elimination. I ended up picking them in my Final Four, so that worked out. I was not convinced by Xavier. I thought they were the weakest 1 seed.
Oh, without doubt.
I thought Gonzaga was interesting, but I was like, well, so many people see them as like their dark horse champion that isn't a top 1 or 2 seed. I didn't think that was going to happen, so it was difficult for me to pick them. That whole entire side of the bracket was difficult for me. Teams I was really high on were my 3 champions were Michigan State, which that proved to be idiotic. Arizona, that was bad. And then Duke, which wasn't the worst pick. I mean, it was a shot away from that being still a possibility with Grayson.
Can we speak about that? Was that the best game in the bracket so far? Because that game was incredible to watch.
Yeah, the Duke-Kansas game might have been the best college basketball game I've seen in like 5 or 10 years. And it's funny because every single year I pick Kansas, because Kansas always seeds well. But many people aren't believers, and I'm always weirdly a believer in Kansas, especially when they had Frank Mason. I think I actually had them winning it all last year. And they always disappoint me. Like the past 4 years, I always have them going double the distance that they actually do. So this year I did the opposite. I'm like, okay, they're going to lose. I think I have them losing in the Sweet 16.
To Clemson?
To Clemson, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
I did. So that obviously didn't freaking work out. Which... I don't know. What do you think of Devontae Graham? Like, he's one of those. It's very interesting for me to try to predict how he does in the NBA. I personally am not a big believer in his professional ability, although I'm a really big character and mentality guy, and I think he's got that straight. It's just like, I don't know. I just think he does it. For me, here's what I always default to, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on my theory here. If I'm trying to evaluate whether I want a guy to get drafted onto my team in the NBA, I don't want him to be a player that's good at a lot of things. I would rather have a player that is great at one thing.
A clear skill will translate.
Correct. So whether it's a 3-point shot or whether it's innate rebounding ability or a defensive stopper.
But Kevin, that's dangerous because Jahlil Okafor, the one clear thing he had was post moves. But he had that. He could score 20 and 10. But then the problem is he can't do anything else.
Correct. I'm still a believer that if Jahlil landed in a different spot, his career could have been different. But I don't fault Jahlil that the NBA changed. Like, he came in, like, if he was drafted and was a person 10 years earlier, I think he would be a great NBA player. It's just that his skill set has become obsolete in the NBA, and it's just not needed. And so that's why a lot of teams are starting to agree with that, and obviously Philly too, that he was just a commodity that wasn't needed. But in general, like, I just like a guy that if I'm choosing between 2 resumes, basically, I want the one that is definitely going to translate in the NBA, even if his other skills are lacking compared to the other guy who's so all around. So with that being said, it's real difficult for me to be against Trae Young, and here's why. I'm not a huge Trae Young fan, as far as like I'm not. I don't think he's like the next Steph Curry. I could see it, right? Like I understand why they say that, which is difficult for me because a lot of people only say that because he just shoots a lot and he has a quick trigger and he passes the ball well, which doesn't mean.
I see CJ McCollum out of him.
And Trae Young?
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. I think now the difference between CJ and Trae Young for me is that I think Trae Young is, and this is the one going back to my one elite characteristic theory. I think Trae Young is a very good passer. Yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny for me because typically I fall in love with passers. Like even if you're like a big that averages like 5.5 assists, I typically fall in love with you. Shout out to Nikola Jokic, but
Joel Embiid
or that. So like I have a difficulty. I can't explain to you why I don't love Trae Young. I think. I don't fault him either because so many people say, well, his criticism is he turns over the ball so much and he shoots so much. If I was on that Oklahoma team that was lacking in talent overall, I too would want, if it was myself or if I was the coach, I would want Trae Young to shoot half my team's shots. Like, it's just when you have a great player, for me, you need to squeeze out all the juice, especially when it's in college, because you want him to get as much experience as he can, being a one and done kind of guy that he is. So I don't know, give me your thoughts on Trae as well as just like other prospects in college that you see really translating now that you've kind of gone through some March Madness.
I guess with Trae Young, I know he's a passer and I know he's got decent range, but I think this might be a fault that he plays at Oklahoma, but I look at him and I'm worried about his defensive ability. I'm worried about his athleticism, creating his own shot. And I keep picturing, even though he's a great passer, as much as I said I see CJ McCollum, I think that's his ceiling. And every time I look at him, I see, this kid's going to go 7th or 8th and end up like Buddy Hield, where he just looks a lot better because of Oklahoma's system and the way they use him. And when he gets there, he's not going to be able to hang with the athletic, talented players in the NBA, which is why, even though Trae Young is clearly a better player in college, like I'd rather have someone with a lot more athletic, even like Colin Sexton, who did ball out for Alabama, even though they lost to Villanova, who I think is one of the whole thing.
So if you're like the 5th pick in the NBA draft and you're in need of a point guard, you take Sexton over Young?
I don't take a point guard in this draft.
But what if you're the 9th pick and both of them are available?
In 9th, further back, I would take probably Colin Sexton over Trae Young. I mean, can see Trae.
That's where I disagree. Even though I'm not a huge Trae Young fan, I am even more against Colin Sexton. Colin Sexton to me is extremely glorified. I actually don't see.
I just don't think there's a point guard in this draft. I don't like either one of them, to being completely honest. I don't think either one of them is going to be an average. I think Elfrid Payton and Colin Sexton are the same person.
I agree. That's probably why I'm so against Colin Sexton. People comp him to John Wall, and I'm like, what? That's the worst comp I've ever heard.
Yeah, the Trae Young debate, I mean, I don't see him being a plus starter on defense. And if you're a point guard who can't defend, you can't be played in the playoffs. You can't win a game. You can't hide a player in the playoffs. And I think Trae Young is going to be an issue in the future.
You know the kind of situation, though, I like Trae Young in, which there isn't really a person like this that I can think of right now in the NBA. But I like him to be a 6 man of the year type player, not in the sense of obviously there are the great 6 men in the NBA, but where I almost want him to be kind of like what Harden was to OKC. Instant offense off the bench, but that's it. Meaning when the starters are in or he doesn't close games, I just want
second unit. Someone's got to run it.
Yeah, and I think he would be very good at that because I do think he's instant offense. I also think he will generate a lot of turnovers in the bad way, like he'll turn over the ball a lot. And I also think that he'll put up a lot of ill-advised shots, but you're willing to live with that if it's your second unit and you need like a spark plug or, like 4 minutes to go before the half or 3 minutes to go in the third quarter. Those are the kind of players I want. I could see him filling in that kind of like what Jamal Crawford is to Minnesota Timberwolves right now, where he just comes in and provides instant offense while the main guys are all resting.
Nobody rests in Minnesota.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I think a role like that actually might serve very well for Trae Young. But obviously, he's going to be drafted to be a point guard. But here's my only thing. if I could pick, like in a dream scenario as just a general NBA fan, where he ends up, I think I would want him to go to the Knicks.
San Antonio.
Because you think that's where his career will end up being the best?
I think he'd do best in San Antonio. I think Dejounte Murray I love to put him and Murray together, even though they're going to be a lot smaller, is the backcourt with Kawhi locking down the wing and defending their best player, even if he's a point guard. And in that sense, you can have an elite passer, two elite passers in the backcourt. You have a great defender in Murray. You have a great ball handler and shooter in Trae Young. And I think in the movement offense, it'd be a dream. That's where I want to see him.
Yeah, but there's no way that Trae Young ends up there.
Yeah, I know. That's why you said dream scenario.
Well, I think the Knicks is reasonable.
But there's so many point guards there.
Yeah, but which one do you think Frank is actually, like, do you think New York's convinced?
Not even Frank. I just watched the Knicks-Sixers game. Who was it? He went off. I can't even think of his name right now. Someone on the Knicks, forgotten name. He was drafted in the lottery a couple years ago. Not Moutier, the other one. There's like a load of point guards on the Knicks right now. And not Will Barton.
Trey Burke?
Yes, Trey Burke. Trey Burke is playing amazing right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Trey Burke was one of the guys he's a Michigan guy, right? He was one of the guys I was really high on, and he ended up kind of like becoming piss poor in the NBA. But,
yeah, Utah was not the right fit.
Yeah.
But like the Knicks are stuffed at point guard. Like there's no room to develop a point guard.
I know, but I just think Trae Young is such we would laugh about this in my little pod, but if you were to watch an Oklahoma game, like the entire time, even when Trae Young was on the bench, they would have the score of the game at the bottom and then a tiny little blip above that always at all minutes of the game would show Trae Young's personal stats. And I've just never seen a player become so glorified in college basketball before, where it was literally like every minute he was on the floor, you were notified of what his point total was, how many assists he had. And
that's some Lonzo shit.
I almost think it was beyond Lonzo. Lonzo obviously was big time in kind of like public media, mostly because of his dad. But as far as just straight basketball, like I don't know much about Trae Young the person. Whereas I knew a decent amount about Lonzo because of just all their coverage on him. But with Trae Young, it was just like, I remember a lot of college basketball analysts and color guards and in-game announcers were saying like that's the best offensive point guard I've ever seen in my 30 years of covering college basketball. And I was just like, that's a really big statement.
Damn. That's honestly, to be honest, the Big 12 is not watchable for me. I've never, football or basketball, it's just hard to watch for me. I don't get motivated with the schools. Why I don't know too much about Kansas. I knew that Izubuki, if he fouled out, Clemson could have won, and he didn't foul until 2 minutes left. I knew Devontae Graham is just another Kansas point guard that's going to do nothing in the NBA is how I feel, which you asked me about a while ago. I never got to add that in.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind switching topics, doing it real quick, did you watch anyone in this tournament truly improve their draft stock? Because I don't think many of the top prospects did too well, except one. There's one guy that I'm in love with that I want in Philadelphia.
I'm really interested. Is he like a top prospect?
A lottery pick.
Is it Wendell Carter?
No, actually, it's Bridges at Nova. I think he has been playing amazing within that offense, and I want him in Philadelphia playing backup wing minutes now.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Because I think all of the top players. I mean, Bagley played fine, but like he didn't answer any question marks. Porter played fine, but he didn't show that he's fully healthy. Colin Sexton didn't do anything amazing. Trae Young was out in the first round. DeAndre Ayton was out in the first round. Who improved their draft stock?
I honestly only think Carter, which is why I brought him up, because I thought he played decently in his March Madness run, and I think that he, because of Marvin Bagley's shadow, is kind of been an afterthought. Yeah, but I think he's still gonna be a top 10 player out of this draft. And I think he's got the potential to be top 5. I remember when both of those guys came in, I'm pretty sure they were number 1 and number 2 in power forward rankings in their class. And I was a lot more of a fan of Carter over Bagley. Now, when they both showcased their skills in college basketball, I immediately fell in love with Marvin Bagley. But I still think Carter's got a lot of games and intangibles to bring to a team. That's why I was wondering if you were going to say that. But I like Bridges.
There was also the point guard for, I'm going to butcher his name, but the point guard for Kentucky, Shea Giles Alexander.
Giles
Shea Alexander or something.
Yeah,
Three names. He played really well.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Kevin Knox from Kentucky.
He's got a grown man baby face, and I hate looking at it. It's shallow, but that's enough for me to hate him.
No, I'm really interested to see where he ends up, because I think that's going to be an interesting player in the NBA. Like I see his ability actually I see him being almost like a Rudy Gay type. Yeah.
That's a bad thing, in my opinion.
No, you and I have very different opinions on Rudy Gay's NBA career, but I would love Rudy Gay's NBA career. But yeah, so I see him being kind of like that. Trying to think of who else that.
Are you on the Doncic hype train now? Do you believe what I was saying?
Actually, that's where I wanted to go to. Are you still under the belief that Doncic is the most sure thing, and kind of in your eyes, if you're just wanting best player, you take Doncic, or you?
More than ever. I mean, the only person who even came close was DeAndre Ayton, and Ayton showed that he can't play defense.
I don't know if about can't play defense.
I mean, that was really bad. That game was awful, and that was Buffalo.
I mean, yeah. But, see, I'm on the train now where even though I like Bagley's game a lot, I'm just, as a Magic fan, I really want a sure thing. I just want the highest floor, and I still think Ayton's the highest floor.
Over Doncic?
Yeah.
Whew.
I mean, look, Ayton, I seriously think Ayton is like, I don't think he's going to be necessarily, but he's got Joel Embiid 2.0 sort of intangibles.
There will never be another Joel Embiid. You take that back right now.
Okay,
he's the real unicorn.
But yeah, I just think Ayton's like, you only get a body like that every 7 to 10 years, typically, and for him to actually have like soft hands and shooting ability and a decent basketball mind, I'm like, oh shit, well, that doesn't come around too often. I think in a dream scenario, I still want Bagley just because I love his game.
Doesn't it feel like it's coming around every year now since Anthony Davis? I mean, we have Kat, we have Joel, we have Porzingis, we have.
As far as good young bigs, sure, but I mean, like none of them have Joel Embiid and, for me, DeAndre Ayton type body. Like that's like, I'm talking like chiseled, like when they were 16, they looked like they were 24. Like,
oh, not Joel. 16-year-old Joel was a stick. That man, HGH in high school. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I'm still low-key a believer that no one knows how old Joel Embiid actually is.
Joel Embiid's in his late 40s.
He's about 29 and a half years old right now. Yeah, so I don't know. I've been on the wave that I think Ayton's the guy I kind of want in Orlando. Like whether we're able to actually draft him, I don't know. I'm gonna be like you over the past 6 years with the whole draft this year. Like I'm gonna be all in as far as figuring out where I want people to go, and as a Magic fan, who I want to end up there. And
you've got fourth best odds right now.
Right.
So it's coming.
It's possible. It's possible. I mean, our loss last night to the Bulls was big.
That's beautiful, actually.
I'm watching that stuff intently. Like I've never been on my Nick Lonabuzz shit ever more than right now. I'm not kidding. I tweeted a couple days ago, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago, that like after a horrendous Orlando Magic lost, I actually like get so excited on the inside that I'm ashamed, because people ask me, they're like, oh, did you see the Magic game last night? And I smile and I say, yes, we lost to the Atlanta Hawks. Like that's how I literally think.
Feel like a soul brother with you now. I feel like deeply connected because you know what I went through.
Yeah, and I actually get it, and it's like, and so much more than, because now that this is really the last year you can tank so effectively, I'm so much of a believer that like I want to be able to do that to the best of our abilities.
And the Sixers are 15 games over 500 the first year they try. Just think about that.
Yeah, I still got to pay you that $15, by the way.
Oh, I know. I was gonna bring it up at the end, but we're gonna hit 50. We're going to hit 50 with our schedule, even without Joel. We're gonna hit 50.
And let me ask you this: let's talk about Philly a little bit. I know that obviously Joel Embiid suffered that basically broke his face. Markel broke his face. I want to talk about Markel as well as Philly in the playoffs. Like,
before you say broke his face, did you hear the description yet? His eye was pushed in. Like, they just said, like, there was an indentation around his eye. Like, his face was like, it was bad. And they haven't even performed the surgery yet because the swelling hasn't gone down.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So how big of a scare is that for you? One, and two, how big of a weight off your shoulders was it to see Markel actually be a real basketball player for 14 minutes the other night or whatever it was?
I'm so proud of. I'll start with Markel. I am so proud of him as a fan, I guess, as a person, for overcoming whatever difficulties he had. Because that first play, did you watch his first play when he touched the ball?
Yeah.
Drove straight into a man, fell over and lost the ball. And then he comes back and in 14 minutes of play puts up 10 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds.
Yeah, I think it might have even been 7 rebounds. Like, he had a ridiculous 14-minute stretch.
And then the second game back, he's hitting these like pull-up jumpers over Nikola Jokic. It was beautiful. I am tempering my expectations for this year because he's a rookie point guard in the NBA, and people are going to figure out how he plays really quickly, right around probably playoff time. So I don't expect big things from him, but I am so proud to see that he's overcome whatever it was, and I know the three-point shot will come back in time. I know that he'll be the shooter he was, and I'm confident. I'm not nervous. But to go over to the Joel topic, if you give me a sec, it wasn't a scare once I heard it was a concussion. When he was laying on the ground, I watched it live. When he was laying on the ground, I actually started crying. I thought it was his knee. And then I saw and I saw him holding his face, and I was like, "Oh, thank God, it's a freak accident."
Wait, like, no lie, you actually started crying?
Yeah.
I was listening to respect. I was listening to
not for the Sixers, for him. Like,
I'm empathetic. I was listening to a sports radio show a couple weeks ago, and the question was, "When's the last time you've actually cried for a sporting event?" And I thought it was a really interesting question because a lot of people are like, "Nah, man, sport." Like for people that are like real sports fans, like I feel like everybody's got their crying story.
There's 2 cries. There's the pride cry, which I almost had when Markel hit that first jumper. Like, I just felt so proud that I almost teared up. And then there's the, oh my God, this is crushing hopelessness, which is what I felt when I saw Joel on the ground.
I had that during the Euro final in 2016 for Portugal, and I had both in the same game. Because obviously I'm like, Ronaldo's my favorite athlete of all time. And I've been following him since he was like less than the age that I am right now. And I just know like how much like the sport means to him and like what. And like also from selfishly, like I wanted him to win that game because I wanted all the Messi lovers to like, I could always like put a real international championship over their argument, which obviously Messi's been so close to doing, but it's never been able to successfully do. And so for Ronaldo not to have that opportunity, I just felt so bad for him as like a human. So I watched that game with my dad, and I actually started bawling and had to excuse myself from the room because I was so sad for him. And also like in a national and like a prideful way, because I just thought that, you know, quite honestly, that was it. Like that France was honestly going to beat us 8-0. I just think they were super talented, and I think even with Ronaldo, we were going to have a really tough time. And then to go through that at the 8-minute mark during the game, and then to ultimately in OT win it, like then I started crying tears of joy.
Roller coaster of emotions.
Oh my God. I honestly, every 6 to 8 months, I'll go on YouTube and look at Portugal European finals. And I'll just play like different highlight montages, and I still, to this day, will start tearing up watching those highlight montages.
I tear up watching the Clemson National Championship regularly. I'll watch the final drive over and over again to the Titanic music. It's one of my favorite videos on YouTube. Honestly, look it up if you want to see some emotion. It's,
you know what we need to do? We need to do a side-by-side video of the actual video and you watching the video and just like your emotion. And then we'll run it through and me doing the Euros, and then we'll try to get everybody on the pod to go to their emotional sports moment.
Sounds like a new YouTube series.
It does.
Oh God, yeah. But back to the Joel thing.
Yeah.
I cannot say I was so proud to see someone get a concussion, or so excited when they diagnosed it as a head injury, because I'm like, it's not his legs, it's a freak accident. He'll be back for time in the playoffs. Which now I don't know because the swelling hasn't gone down, but I still think we could beat the Pacers in the first round.
Yeah, look, I think it's really interesting of me if you ask me where the Sixers are. They were this season and for the playoffs the biggest wild card in the NBA. Because
Not for me.
I still think they're the biggest wild card. I think they have the potential to get swept in the first round and to sweep in the first round. I can't say that about any other team.
So the last thing we talked about, it was off pod, was there's the actual pipe dream that is totally believable. It was before the Joel injury. It was during the Markelle Fultz awakening, I guess, when I was really on my sugar high, I guess, from how well we were playing. I was telling you that I believe that the Sixers could win the 3 seed, and then the Heat who are now only half game behind the Wizards, could get the 6 seed, and we would blow the Heat out easy if Joel was healthy. Whiteside wouldn't be able to do anything. And then we would win that game, and then we would play the winner of the Celtics-Wizards series without Kyrie Irving. Honestly, I think we could beat a banged-up Celtics team or a Wizards team coming off a Celtics win. And then we'd come into a Eastern Conference Finals matchup, fully healthy, against the worn-down winner of a 7-game Raptors-Cavs series. We win that in 5, and we're in the NBA Finals and get blown out by the Houston Rockets. That's the pipe dream.
Well, you could make it a little bit more realistic than that. You think you're going to beat Toronto or the Cavs in 5?
And then the realistic part is we get blown out in 4 games by the Houston Rockets. That is the pipe dream of a Sixers fan right now.
Look, for Philly's sake, I really want them. Like, if you're a true Philly fan, I know you are, I would totally look at this playoff experience as you just want them to go through everything. I think you want them to sweep. Here's the perfect scenario for me if I'm a Philly fan. I want them to sweep the Pacers in the first round. No bullshit. Joel's on his stuff. Ben Simmons does what he's supposed to. The role guys do what they do. Markelle has flashes. In the second round, I want them to go through a lot.
A 7-game
battle. I want them to go through a 7-game battle where
John Wall
they get blown
out
one
game 6.
Yeah, exactly. They get blown out one game. They blow out one game. They go through 2 or 3 really close games, and they lose in a heartbreaking at home game 7 to, I guess, the Wizards would be a good example, or something like that. That's what I want for them to happen, because I think for how young this team is, you want them to go through as many experiences as possible, because for the next 2 to 5 years, that's what's going to ultimately put them to the next level, because they're going to have experience of Game 7 and blowing out a team.
Is it bad I don't believe in experience anymore? Can you? I just want to add this in. So you're a basketball lifer. You believe in experience and value leadership and all that senior experience, right?
Yeah.
Back when the process was first starting, they kept saying losing culture. You need players who know how to win. Experience. If you play for a losing team, you'll never learn how to win. The Sixers don't know how to win, and they won 45 games this year.
I actually think you're underestimating your veterans.
The role of JJ Redick and Amir Johnson.
That's exactly what I'm going to point to.
I don't think it's been that extreme. I mean, you were seeing the things Dario was putting in beforehand. I mean, these players were all there for the losses besides Ben. I mean, Robert Covington has been through nothing but losses. Joel Embiid has seen a 10-win team. These guys, and then when it comes to playoffs, look at the Milwaukee Bucks and the Toronto Raptors. They've been going through the Milwaukee Bucks are supposed to have experience after going to the second round last year, and they're the 8th seed right now, and they don't look like they're going to put up a fight. The Wizards have been going to the playoffs every year. John Wall's been getting experience. Raptors have been getting experience every year. They're not making a leap. They're playing the same. I argue that it's about the situation itself. You don't really need the experience. If you have the athletes and the talent, you can get it done, because we've been playing basketball your whole life. A win or go home game, whether it's the NBA Finals or a high school tournament. A win or go home game is the same feeling. These players know what it is.
I totally get your point of view, and there's some parts of it that I agree with. For example, my pick for the World Cup this coming up year is France, and it's not because I think they're the most talented squad overall, even though that's what I think. I think it's because sometimes in sports, when the talent level is so high, I like to pick teams that are naive to the situation. And I think that the French club is so young overall that they don't know like how hard they have to play. And it's almost like my mini example of that is like when you first start a semester in whatever grade you're in. And
freshman year.
Sure. Let's say, but the first test for me is always the most difficult. And it's not because that has the most difficult content or whatever. It's because you don't know how hard to study. Do you get what I'm saying? So like for me, it's difficult because you don't know the structure of the test, the system, you know, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm talking about. When I agree with you in the sense of I don't think having 38 playoff appearances creates such a giant advantage for you if your opponent has 28 playoff appearances, right? But I do think having like a game 7 under your belt, getting swept under your belt, sweeping under your belt, I think those experiences are still pretty big because...
Well, what about the 2012 Thunder? The ones that had never been to the playoffs before went to the Eastern Conference, went to the NBA Finals.
Correct. And
then after having that experience, they never went back. When they were naive and young, they went to the finals. And when they weren't naive, after their experience, they never went back.
But we all know that they would have if that unit was collectively
But they stayed together for 2 more years after that.
But it's not always like right after that it happens.
But still, that's a 3-year window.
Look at the Dallas Mavericks championship. That was full of vets.
Well, that was a miracle run you're never going to see in the modern NBA again. A scrappy team nobody believed could do it.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think their experiences...
That was 10 years ago now.
Well, sure, but still...
That's a different NBA 10 years ago.
I mean, even 2012 OKC run was a different NBA.
Yeah, but I mean, but the Sixers of now is the most compared to that Thunder team. I don't think there's a better comparison.
I don't know. That's interesting. I was just listening to the Kevin Durant pod with Bill Simmons. I don't know if you...
Yeah.
It's pretty good. You should listen to it. But
I know.
But that's actually something they discuss is the similarities between Philly now and OKC then. And I thought Kevin Durant brought up a really fair point in that, yes, there's a lot of young talent on Philly that could become great, but you can't assume Markelle in this position or anyone else. Like, that team had 3 future MVPs on it, whereas your team maximum has 2 right now. And that's like a completely different dynamic. It's the difference between the Warriors having 3 All-Stars and having 4.
But I'm not comparing what their future careers are. I'm comparing where the 2012 team at the time had a great point guard, Russ, Ben Simmons, similar comparison. They had an all-world tall guy, Joel Embiid, Kevin Durant.
Okay.
And then they had a bench playmaker who now we have Markelle, who isn't quite at what James Harden was at that point, but is that. I mean, they even fit in the same positions.
All right. To me, you can't put Markelle and then James Harden in the same breath.
Not yet, no. But that's the kind of mold that if Markelle...
Correct. If Markelle, let's say Markelle just blows up in the playoffs, right? And he averages like 19 a game, which would
he won't play enough to average 19.
Correct. I'm just saying, what if that happens, right? And then maybe I'm like, okay, I can see your comparison. But right now, like, he's literally played a handful of games and has had only moments. And Harden was actually a top player that just happened to serve the second unit because that's how the way the team ran. Like I said, if I'm a Philly fan, I just want them to go through as many experiences as possible because
Eastern Conference Finals or bust.
Okay, well then you're gonna bust because it's very real that you guys could lose in the first round.
Oh yeah, no, I'm ignoring the negatives. Only be positive. I mean, that's my irrational sports fan.
Let's talk about playoffs a little bit. Actually, no, before we do that, because this is one thing I really wanted to talk to you today about. And I'm really interested to see your opinion because we had this conversation a month ago, and I wonder if this has changed for you. So I'm a big believer that Ben Simmons has had the best rookie season since LeBron. And even though he has had the giant advantage and having to be able to sit out a year due to injury and train and work on his body and rehab.
Oh, say air quote on injuries, because he could have came back in January.
True. Like a lot of people like to say, well, he's not even technically a rookie. Yes, I understand, but the reality is, like, Blake Griffin won the award in the same way, and that's just the way the rule goes. Like, it happens. He never actually played a game in his rookie season, so this is his rookie season. I get that there's an advantage. I think it's a bigger advantage than people realize, because you get to be around the culture for so long. But do you give any merit, and how much, into that Donovan Mitchell should be the rookie of the year?
I actually can't fathom. You know me as one of the biggest Donovan Mitchell fans, right?
That's why I'm so interested to hear your answer, because I think although you are I'm a
stupid Jazz fan. You remember I'm a low-key Jazz fan. Beginning of the year, I told you the Jazz is the franchise I would most likely like to be a fan of, because they run it so well. If you remember that.
Yeah.
So, but
you're also a giant Philly fan, and Ben Simmons is like your hero, and it has a slice of your heart. So that's why I think it's interesting to want to hear like your point of view on that.
First off, Ben Simmons is not my hero. He's my least favorite starter on that team.
Okay, whoa. Let's go back 30 seconds. Why is that?
Dario Saric is the heart, who pushes us forward. How can you not love Super Dario doing jumping jacks and like saying weird things? He's a funny dad joke kind of guy.
Look, just because you're a white guy and Ben Simmons is like light-skinned Australian and you don't identify with that.
Is Joel Embiid, my Lord and Savior. Yes. Robert Covington is the embodiment of the process. JJ Redick is one of the coolest, most real guys I've ever heard or seen. He is dope, and as a Magic fan, you know that's true.
Yes.
And Ben is the kind of guy who looks like he's in it for himself.
What? Why do you get that?
He's got this cold, honestly, so this is a pipe. I love Ben. I love him. Like, I'm not knocking against him, but he's the kind of person who I feel when his contract is up, after he takes like the huge money and does his 8 years here like KD did, he will be gone fast and can say anything to a bigger market to increase his brand.
So do you see him as like a different play style, but the attitude of like a Carmelo Anthony?
Attitude of Kevin Durant. Where he is more about the brand because he spent 8 years building a team, fostering this deep connection with Russ, which is what Ben's doing with Joel right now. They're inseparable. They hang out all the time. But when push comes to shove, Ben's going to go where it best suits Ben, and he has no loyalty to the city. Does that make sense? Like, I see him as more of an athlete out there, like an NBA player out there for himself, which a lot of NBA players are.
Do you think that's because he is a foreigner and and he doesn't necessarily fit the mold of a brotherly love 76er?
That might be it. I'm not going to say foreigner because Dario Saric is a foreigner, and I feel like Dario would die for the city.
But I think Dario and Ben are two different kind of foreigners, in the sense of, I think Dario is like that, like stereotypical foreigner that's just like a very intimate person. Like, I think I'm like that, right? Like, when you get to know me, I like to like get to know you at like a very deep level. I feel like Dario's that kind of like brotherly love, like hand around the shoulder kind of person. Whereas Ben is like outsider kind of foreigner, like does his own thing, beats to his own drum, like ultimately is in it for himself. I get what you're saying about that, but my thing is, that is completely opposite of how he plays, because how he plays is completely for his team.
Yeah, but it's also brand passing. There was a play. I was actually at the Magic Sixers game 2 weeks ago, and it actually, my heart dropped, because this conspiracy I've been saying that Ben's going to leave after 8 years, like as fast as he can. It was a rebound where Joel Embiid clearly had the rebound, and it bounced up, and Ben grabbed it from his hands, ripped it, and ran down the court. And Joel stayed there, standing still, didn't turn back to run down the court, shook his head to the sideline, and jogged back. And it wasn't one of those laughing jokes. It was one of those, are you kidding me jokes, like looks. And I wish I had recorded the moment, because it showed me that, like, I think Ben really cares, because look at his branding with his agent. Ben is a point guard. He's the one who says he's a point guard. He's bought the media on it. He's like, I am Ben Simmons, the point guard. This is my brand. I'm part of Clutch Sports. Like, I feel like there's a lot more drive to him to make himself succeed in the team, not in like basketball sense, but in like branding sense. And I feel like staying on one team his whole career, like Dirk or Kobe, or I think Joel would stay in Philadelphia forever. I don't think Joel would ever leave. I don't know Ben feels this. I feel like Ben is willing to leave if the offer's nice enough. No. And as I guess it's irrational.
I still want to go back to the Mitchell thing, but before I do that, I want to ask you to elaborate on that for half a second in the dynamic of the same way you said, I don't think Joel will ever leave, and that Ben Simmons is in it for the brand rather than really for the team. I do think that everyone would have said the same thing about KD in the sense of KD will never leave. He's our OKC child, and that if anything, Russell was the brand kind of player. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, before KD left, it was still like he was really the OKC child, and Russ was the Robin to KD's Batman. And even though he was an unbelievable Robin, he was still the brand guy.
I will say, though, the one difference about that is Kevin kind of hints at it a lot with his contract. And I feel like you could see hints of Kevin wanting to leave with the way Giannis is talking about his contract now. Like, I hope the team puts me in the best position to win. If not, I'm going to explore my options, but I want to stay here because this is my city. Like, that kind of attitude is what I think Ben's going to take it. Because by that way, you're saving yourself when you do leave and kind of blaming the team. So, like, you could see, if you go back and, like, watch the dynamics of Kevin and Russ that year, there's hints that Kevin was going to leave. Small, but, like, if you're an irrational fan who loves your team, you're going to ignore them because you don't think Kevin would ever leave. Whereas, I just don't see a situation. Joel has never made a reference of, he's already signed that huge extension. He's here. He signed his extension. Whereas with Ben, I feel, again, this is 8 years down the line. I'm talking about after, once he's an unrestricted free agent. Yeah. I feel like he's gone. It's irrational, but watching them play, watching the way he reacts, I think he loves the guys, but I think he'd rather play in LA. Like look at the year the draft happened that year. His agent was saying Ben wanted to go to LA. He was going to force him to move to LA. Sixers drafted him, and he just accepted it.
It's a really interesting point. I've never thought about it like that. And it's so macro that it's like maybe not even a point, but I think it's really interesting. I want you to go back ultimately, though, to the Simmons versus Mitchell Rookie of the Year conversation.
Donovan Mitchell has no argument for Rookie of the Year. I just can't rationalize how a rookie with 10 triple-doubles, shooting efficiently, leading his team to a great record, better than the Utah Jazz, scoring third in points, first in rebounds, first in assists, first in steals, third in shooting percentage. He is doing everything at a higher clip, and Donovan's scoring more because he's asked to score more.
And it's not a knock on Donovan. I feel like a lot of people say well, because he's second Rookie of the Year, he's not a good rookie.
If Donovan Mitchell was a rookie last year, he would have won a Lance Award. I would have said he deserved it.
I think 70% of the last Rookie of the Year conversations, he would have had a better.
I think he deserved it over Joel Embiid last year. You know how much I thought Joel deserved the Rookie of the Year.
Well, when you play 31 games or whatever, you need to.
He was still better than Malcolm Brogdon.
It doesn't matter.
Let's not go there. We've talked about this before. Let's not go there.
But yeah, I
don't think there's much discussion. Donovan Mitchell.
Although I think that's a very hot topic because so many people are like, well, if it wasn't for Donovan Mitchell, the Utah Jazz would be an afterthought in the playoffs. And yes, that's obviously true, but I think the same thing for Ben Simmons. And if you look at the stats and all, let's have this conversation for a minute. Do you think, because the way you defended Ben Simmons' position, I thought was very interesting. Do you think that triple doubles are too glorified?
I think you have to look at them through a certain lens, in the sense that they hope if they're empty or not. Because Ben's triple doubles are mostly highly productive, shoots the ball 4 times, is passing to his teammates and crashing the boards. They're very full triple doubles, where he'll get 10 points, 15 rebounds, and 13 assists. And these aren't, besides like the occasional rebound steal, he's aggressively offensive rebounding, aggressively running the floor. He should have more assists than usual, but a lot of Sixers have been missing threes before we went on this run. I mean, I think they're a good marker, but they shouldn't be the end-all be-all. Okay. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult for me because I personally, I think like the triple-double conversation kind of like blew out of proportion when Russell Westbrook last season started doing what he was doing. You could even argue the year before when James Harden was really starting to put up a lot of triple-double numbers, and it was like 50-point triple-double numbers that people were starting to like really overvalue the triple-double. Before that, I would say about 10 years ago, I highly valued the triple-double number because it was typically not the kind of player that was a superstar that would get him. It was like a Rajon Rondo type that happened to have a high rebound clip that would get it, or like a Draymond Green type before he blew up really with the Warriors.
Yeah.
That would get it. And so those were the kind of players that I always valued highly more than others, because I do think stat stuffing in that scenario is super valuable, because a guy that can do 3 different things for you at the highest clip for a team, I think is an insane value. Where I start to draw a line for me now is a lot of people act like it's a loss when somebody averages 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 8.5 assists. And because they don't have that extra assist and a half, it's like, oh, well, you know, he could be playing better. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, you're still stat stuffing.
I'll have to say something about Ben Simmons here, in the sense that his triple doubles are grossly efficient, in the sense that he's taking these last like 10 games, he's taking like 4 or 5 shots a game, and he's playing 28 minutes and he's getting 13, 14 assists and 10 rebounds. Like, that's just a player playing basketball.
Yeah, that's extremely valuable. Whereas I'm not a huge fan of like half the triple doubles, even though I think he's a great player, that Russ gets, because it's like 28, 10, and 10.
He's playing 45 minutes too.
Yeah, exactly. And just the amount of times. And look, like if I'm a player and I know I'm a rebound away from getting triple double, like I'm probably gonna headhunt for a rebound. Like, and I don't even blame players for that. But I think because if you look at like games where like they're playing the highlights and they say Russ had 27, 11, and 7, because he didn't have 3 more rebounds, it's like, oh, he had a really good game. But on the games where Russ had 35 but took 42 shots and had also like 10 and 11 assists, it's like, oh, now that was his game of the year. Whereas I would much rather typically have that first game where you were talking about the efficiency is there, and even though he might have been 3 rebounds off from a triple double, his overall production was much greater. So that's the only line I draw for triple doubles. But I just think it's like such an overblown conversation so many times nowadays in the media.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, they're looking for a headline, and triple double is a flashy headline right now.
Okay, last thing I want to talk about to wrap up this basketball pod.
Oh, before you talk about it, I want to say I was right about the Western Conference playoffs, where you told me Denver was 100% getting in, and I said Utah's coming up and New Orleans is going to stay in there. That's exactly what happened. Just wanted to say that.
Well, Denver still has a possibility.
They're not getting in. The 8th and 9th are in.
The Mason Plumlee block last night gave them a huge chance, because they got a huge win last night.
Yeah, they're still 2 games back of the Pellies, and I think I called this pretty well, based off, because you were completely against me. Let's not get too
excited until the closings happen, actually. Anyways, last conversation I want to have with you. Mm-hmm. I had an epiphany, and this was pre a lot of the injuries, like thumb injury on the Warriors, and KD having to sit out for a little bit, and Clay going out. I think that I will take Houston over Golden State right now.
I was at that 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago last time we talked.
Correct. And I want to get your take on why that is, and as well as, because here's the thing, I say that, whereas I equally also think that it would not completely shock me if Houston lost in the first round. And here's the scenario. Houston blows out game 1 to, let's say, the Pelicans, right?
Okay.
They blow out the Pelicans in game 1. In game 2, it's like a close game, and the Pelicans win, right? And there's murmurs about, wow, James Harden always chokes in the playoffs. Chris Paul's never advanced past the second round. Mike D'Antoni has never been able to lead a team further than what he's supposed to. So, and I don't think that will be an issue. But then let's say game 3, now we're in New Orleans, for example. Pelicans go out and start on like a 20-12 run in the first quarter, and Chris Paul, James Harden are looking at each other like, oh shit, is this our career? It's like, do we just not ever advance? And I'm not saying that will happen and that I would put money on it. I'm just saying that I could see that happening first round. And let's say that all that happens, they still win in 6 games, take care of business, go to the next round. But that chip, I think, on their shoulder would be lost, and there would already be question marks happening first round. And I could see Houston being a second round exit. It's plausible to me, but I equally think that the criticism of Chris Paul never getting past the second round is unfair, because if you really look back at his scope of his playoff experiences, yes, I think he had teams that on paper with the Clippers should have been able to do a lot better in the playoffs, but they almost never had a clean, injury-free run. And even when they had those instances, it was never Chris Paul in question of playing hard enough or being the person that lost the game for them. If you really look back, Chris Paul is the reason why they even got to many second rounds, because he was able to play the defense he did in a game 7 in the first round, or hit the shot over Utah like a season or 2 ago. I think that is completely unfair, and I think Chris Paul has to be one of the most competitive players in the NBA. I would say top 5. And I just think that it's been an unlucky roll of the dice for him as far as playoff experiences. With James Harden, I think it's semi-fair. I think he's never really had a great team. I never was convinced that Dwight Howard team was something that was going to do well in the playoffs. I think that the James Harden... here's my only fair criticism about James Harden. I think he had the worst playoff game I've ever seen out of a superstar ever, which was that game versus the Spurs without Kawhi, where the Spurs defeated them by 30 points and he took like 7 shots or something like that. That was the worst game I've ever seen out of a superstar. And then the whole Mike D'Antoni thing, like, I don't know, like, I get it. Like, there are such things as like regular season coaches, and he definitely makes point guards look good, and he has a point guard heavy system. But why, if that goes to another level, why can that not work in the NBA, especially the NBA of now, which is all about fast-paced tempo, shooting or scoring in the 120-point caliber range, as well as being ball dominant with your point guard? Just talk to me about like those issues, and if you see Houston possibly cracking, or if you are convinced that they're finals bound.
It's weird because you prefaced that by saying you don't think it's likely, but it could happen, which is fair because obviously that could happen. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Do I think they're going to sweep their first round team? Yes. Do I think they're going to win in 5 or 6 the second round? Yes. Do I think they'll beat the Warriors? Yes. Do I think they could lose any of those matchups? Yes. They're not implacable. They don't really have a dominant big. They could have a cold shooting night. Someone could get hurt. James Harden could be a head case. Like, anything could happen. But I don't know. This is a tough topic for me to talk on. I guess it just dials down to, I'm most confident that James Harden and Chris Paul have been there before and are consummate professionals. And they know this year is a year that's something special. And I don't think even if they start to slip, they're going to doubt themselves, because they've been chasing they were chasing the Warriors for a while, and they never doubt themselves. And now look, they're 7.5 up on them. I guess, does that make sense? It's not too elaborate.
I And I think to your point, I think there actually is a lot of good in the fact that D'Antoni, Harden, and Chris Paul all struggle with the same narrative, which is lack of playoff success. And I think sometimes when it's like, to bring up something that we were talking about before, it's like that Dallas Mavericks championship team where it was a bunch of old guys that always wanted to win it but never had the right situation. And then I think there are situations, if you look at sports history, where sometimes people with all the same issue galvanize together because of that issue and are able to ultimately triumph with the greatest victory, which in this case would be an NBA championship for the Rockets. I just think it actually might bode well that Chris Paul and James Harden and Mike D'Antoni all have the same demons, and they would be able to defeat them together rather than they all have their own separate issues.
All right, that makes a lot. I mean, that's probably the same page I'm on there. I hate to not, I could be completely agreeing with you. It's not as entertaining to listen to, but I mean, that's the truth. I mean, the fact that they can rally around each other makes a lot of sense. While you were talking, though, I was reminded of a point that I made a bet with you with like 25 games left that the Rockets wouldn't lose more than 2 games, and They've only lost 1 so far, and there's 5 games left.
Correct. Last night, I don't know if you saw. Does that scare you? I don't know if you saw Greens, but we didn't actually make the bet because you was out.
Because you made it 1, and I was like, do 2, and you're like, no, 2's too risky.
I did a pretty good job of knowing the line, didn't I?
Yeah.
I've become weirdly good at that, by the way. Anyway, so
I was on it too. Then, like, I was there. I was like, they'll drop 1. They'll maybe drop 2. They won't drop 3.
Yeah, I don't think they would drop 3. Now, this is another reason why I think you were saying this a little bit too, how I think this is just a year of destiny for Houston. As far as just like everything is clicking, the chemistry is working. Like
Steph Curry's got bad ankles, which I've been saying for a year.
Yeah, like there's a lot of things pointing in Houston's direction, and I think even last night, looking at their win over Phoenix, who obviously is a piss poor NBA team, but like the truly great teams don't lose a game like that. And it's just some nights, like, I get it, like teams just don't come out and play with the same fire, or like random bad teams will get hot. I think that's what happened with Phoenix. But for them to still pull off a win, like in literally the last second of the game, for a buzzer beater by a role player and a guy that was sitting on his couch a few months ago, it just like adds to the narrative. Like it's almost like Auburn that year they won the Iron Bowl, of just like the team of destiny thing. Like that just happens in sports where just all the things are clicking for you.
When one player gets hot and another one player gets hot with them, everybody thinks they have the confidence to be that guy.
Exactly. And that's real. Like that's
if you played on any sport ever, played on any team ever, like if your boys are hitting shots, if your boys are making plays, you feel like you can do it too.
Yeah, exactly. And even though you may completely not be able to do so, but you will, because it's just like so much of sports is mentality.
The pressure's off. Like if James Harden and Chris Paul can carry our team, someone else can go and drop 35 one night because he's feeling it too.
It's true. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this basketball pod with my boy, the Philly guy. We had a lot of great conversation about, obviously started off with college basketball, but ultimately turned into the NBA, and a lot of Philly talk, which I'm sure my guest here isn't too mad about that, but I'm not either. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go check out our shit on social media and also on thelockerroombeef.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Next time you hear me talk, the Sixers will have 50 wins.